Today is Monday, May the 6th, 2013. This is the start of an interview with Mr. John Kaucheck at the RSVP offices of Catholic Services in Macomb, 26238 Ryan Road, Warren, Michigan. Mr. Kaucheck is 89.
No, 94. I'll be 95 in a couple more
About
months.
5 years.
I would take those.
His date of birth is July the 9th, 1923.
1918.
Consistent.
Yeah.
John, according to this,
Somehow I
it's
had,
1923.
Where'd you get that information?
you know what, I took that information when I called you, and I did my math wrong.
Oh,
Okay.
I
Okay.
think I thought you
Okay.
said that,
Now I know what
89, but-
I missed. Okay.
yeah.
1918, excuse me. Mr. Kaucheck currently resides at 17003 Franziska, Macomb Township. My name is Dave Brousseau, and I'll be the interviewer, and Gary Miglio will be the videographer. Mr. Kaucheck, would you state for the record the branch of service in which you serve?
The Army.
Okay, let's go back. This is pre-your birthday. Pre. The interesting part is your folks were immigrants.
Right.
Where did they come from? Why did they come?
Well, they came from, then was Austria-Hungary, came here in 1911. And the story goes that my mother's brother came to Calumet, Michigan first, where at that time there was like 60,000 people working there, and the copper mines were in full production. And the mines were depth mines. So that was, at that time,
Versus surface mining.
versus surface mining, and that was the finest copper in the world. And then in later years, as the mines were getting too costly to operate because they would fill with water and they weren't safe, and then they discovered surface mining out in Wyoming. And they found out that this rich copper wasn't needed in industry. So the mines eventually were closed.
This was 1911.
This was 1911 up to,
Give or take,
then my brother and I were born in 19...
One would wonder who in the world would go to Calumet from across the pond. On the other hand, there was a time when Calumet was larger than the city of Chicago
Oh, I'm sure it was.
during those mining.
Yeah, I'm sure
They call it shaft mining.
Sure it was.
So you're still not John yet.
Pardon me?
You're not John yet when you got to Calumet.
No.
You came sometime after that.
1918.
How many were in the family? 8?
There was, at that time, there were 6. 2 brothers and 2 sisters that were born in Austria-Hungary. When they came here, my oldest brother was 10 years old.
Then with all the joy, the rest flowed out.
Then my other brother next to me was born in 1914, and I was born in 1918.
How did we get into a discussion of Yugoslavia, Bosnia, Herzegovina?
Well, it was right in that region. They were thinking of making a country. And then after World War II, when they decided to make that country Yugoslavia, and Tito came in power, and even though he was a communist, he had no dealings with Russia. So the northernmost region in Yugoslavia, if you look at a map today, you'll see that the northernmost region, they name that Slovenia. And then just south is Croatia, and then further south there's Bosnia and Albania.
Herzegovina?
There were 7 countries in Yugoslavia.
Yeah, okay. So your dad got into the mining business. What was he doing before?
Well, farm. They lived on the
Oh.
farm. They lived in this little village. It was about 75 people, 75 families. And he lived off the farm, and when he got to Calumet, I guess the story goes that he went to Calumet and Hecla Mining Company. They owned, and they asked him what he could do. He said, well, they lived on the farm, but he had farm implements that he took care of.
Machinery.
So they put him in the machine shop, and that's where he started his knowledge of machinery.
Was the move because of a fear of staying there or opportunity?
That's what I say, when we were growing up, when I was a kid growing up, and before they all had died or got married, they never wanted to talk about, and being an ethnic family, Monday through Friday, our dinner was like at 6 o'clock at night with the family. There was no conditions. Saturday was more or less, because everybody was going different places, and Sunday was the same way. After church on Sunday, we ate our dinner at 1 o'clock, and then people went to different, scattered.
I'm not sure what specifically was the fear, but I suspect it was
I don't know.
persecution of some kind to get out.
Of course, you know, World War started, 1917,
Yeah,
and I think where they live in this small community, and it was right in the mountains. It's only about 7 miles where they lived from the Swiss Alps.
so come 1924, what lured your family to Detroit?
That's when Henry Ford published that he's going to pay $5 a day.
$5 a day.
So they decided to come to Detroit, and we lived in Highland Park, and all the Ford factory facilities were in Highland Park then.
Yeah,
And my dad was walking down Manchester Avenue shortly after we got here, and a fella came out and he said, "You looking for a job?" And my father's broken English said, "Yes." "So what do you do?" And he told him that he was a little interested in machinery. And they took him right in, put him to work, and then he went to their trade school there, learned to be a toolmaker.
was this Ford?
Ford.
Ford. And the choice of car company was just accidental.
Yeah, that's the way it happened, you know.
What happened during the Depression?
During the Depression, and of course, I think I told you that the 6 of us all worked for Chrysler. And my 2 brothers and my sister and myself were in upper management at Chrysler, so we have a dream story. When sometimes Obama talks about you can make it in America, well,
Yeah.
we did real well with Chrysler. Of course,
How did you happen to get with Chrysler?
Well, my oldest brother, he started there first, and then my sister started working there, and then my other brother, and then my other sister, and then of course when we moved to Michigan, and I think I told you first they rented a house around the new center building now, and back then that was like 1924. The landlord used to come around and collect the rent. And when they came here, they didn't want any kids. Well, my brother and I was just a little over 6, and he was around 11. So during the summertime, when we were out of school, we would kind of hide in the afternoon if he was coming. And we got caught twice. We got kicked out of 2 houses on account of children. And we finally bought this house in Highland Park, just before the Depression. That was 1927.
When did your athletic prowess begin to take hold? Back in Calumet?
No, I was too young then. Probably when I was, and again, being an ethnic family, we went to Liberty School, which was in Highland Park, and you could take music lessons in school there. It didn't cost nothing. So I was taking piano, and my brother next to me was taking violin. Then when I got in the 5th and 6th and 7th grades there, I got interested in baseball. And boy, my mother would say, you gotta practice, you gotta practice. Baseball came first, so, and I ruined it to this day that I didn't stay with it. But I kept on singing. I told you I sang in the cathedral choir
You didn't
for
do so bad.
17 years.
You didn't do so bad.
And I didn't bring my baseball thing with you. I showed you that. Well, I have the one here when I was sliding into third base. And that's the game where I got the winning hit in the 9th inning when we won in the Sandlots.
That guy that's tagging you out there, that's Ty Cobb.
No, that's me sliding.
Ha! Now, Gary, I'm at a disadvantage because I can't
Okay.
see. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah. Got it.
It's too bad I had that in there and I didn't bring it. That's when they had me on their shoulders.
Now, don't worry, we'll get to those pictures.
Okay.
Now, this became a big part of your life, your
Baseball,
athletic.
yeah. I went, and I was, not trying to be a braggart, but I was a pretty good ball player.
Uh-huh.
And Wish Egan was the Tiger Scout.
Yeah.
And in 1938, I went to Beaumont because I was a Tiger Farm, and I played there one summer.
Now, let's go back to your exercise at Ford, or Chrysler, excuse me. You apparently took a shine to that company too, and were doing pretty well.
When I got out of school in 1935, the Depression was still lingering, and I couldn't find a job anyplace. I would take any kind of job that was available, and my brothers and sisters were all working there, but some weeks, and my dad got laid off at Ford's, and around 1937, when things really started picking up, he was 54 at the time, and they said he was too old. There was no unions then, so. But my brothers and sisters were working like 2 days, 3 days, 4 days a week. And then in 1936, my brother next to me called me and he said, there's an opening in the mailing room at Dodge Main. So I went over there and my first pay was $65 a month.
You to be 20,
No,
18?
No, I was just going on
18.
Going on 19.
Now, were you out in the world fooling around chasing women all over the place?
No, you asked me that. Remember what I told you?
Yes.
I was interested in baseball.
Right.
And I didn't have time for drinking or smoking or chasing young girls.
So your response hasn't changed since
Hasn't
we
changed,
talked.
no. Well, I had a wonderful marriage, 57 years.
I know you
so.
did. I know you did. And you met the bride in.
At the truck plant, when they built the truck plant on Mound Road. And I
So
went
you
out
didn't
there-
have to go out and chase around. You found her right where you were working.
Right. Well, I didn't know her then yet. But when I went to Mound Road, I took care of the mail, and back then, they didn't have all these cell phones and stuff. They had the switchboard.
Yeah.
So when a call came in, whoever was calling, they'd ask for a number, and then the number was on the switchboard, so I relieved the telephone operator at 10 o'clock when she went on relief, from 12 to 1 when she went on lunch, and from 2 to 2:15 when she went on relief. And I did that for almost a year and a half. And then I finally got my first desk job, and I thought I really had it made then.
Now, somewhere in there, the war,
Well,
Creeps in.
that was still, the war didn't start till 1939, I think, when they invaded Poland. When Hitler invaded Poland, that was the first time. And then it got worse, and then of course.
what was your feeling about that?
Well, didn't think too much of it, you know, because Roosevelt had said, you know, he would never go to war.
Mhm.
But then, I think I told you, when Pearl Harbor was December 7th, I was out bowling with a couple of my buddies. And we came out, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was on the radio that the Japs had bombed Pearl Harbor, and I was out at the Selfridge Field on Monday because I wanted to get in the Air Corps. And I was there about 7 hours for interviews and physicals. And then they had a simulated cockpit there of a fighter plane. And you sat in there and it did all kinds of gyrations. And then they said, come back the next day. So I went back the next day, which was Tuesday. And I was there for about 6-7 hours again. And they said they'd call me. And of course, nothing was started yet. I never heard from them. And then I was working at the truck plant. We were building Army trucks. And I was getting those deferments, like I told you, till 1943.
Then what happened in 43?
43, well, first I had deferments because I was an expediter at the truck plant, building Army trucks. And then for my father, which I was sole dependent. And,
Oh, that's right,
yeah.
yeah, you had that deferment
Yeah.
for a while.
And then that ran out, and then I was classified 1A, and then I
Now,
was,
we kind of lost track inside of this little gap. You took this little gal to the altar, and in order to do that, you had to get special dispensation from the church.
well, I told you what happened.
I know.
Do you want to hear the story?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So anyway, I met Eleanor at the truck plant, and we knew that I was going to be classified 1A, so we decided to get married on the 18th of September. And we were going to, Eleanor belonged to St. Paul's here in Grosse Pointe Woods, and we were going for instructions during the summer. And Father Horkin, he just died here recently. He was the associate pastor there. And it must have been in August when we were there for almost to the end of the sessions. And Father Melvin was the pastor, and he was in his 50s. And he popped into the room and he said, what's going on here? And Father Horkin said, well, Eleanor and John are going to get married. He says, when? September 18th, here at St. Paul's. So Father Melvin looks at Eleanor and says, do you have to get married? You know, questioning whether she was pregnant or
What
not.
would ever make him say that?
I don't know.
I mean, the time must have had some impact
Maybe,
on it,
yeah.
but I can't imagine going into a priest and
Well, he
taking
did.
instructions and everything and having him say that.
So anyway, Eleanor says, no, Father. He said, well, why are you getting married then? You know, he might get killed. And I can remember this even to this day. If we get married, I know he's going to come home.
Mm.
So that's the way it turned out.
Okay, so now you march off to war.
March off to war.
Where was your boot?
Fort Custer, was there for about a week, and then I went to Camp Roberts in California
What did you do there?
in basic training. And
What
I
did
was
you do?
I was assigned to the military, to the artillery. field
What
artillery.
made them do that? What
What-
artillery experience did you have?
None. None.
At the time, I think it was more based on need,
I have no idea.
so
I was
you became
25
a
at the-
sharpshooter.
Yeah, I was 25 at the time, so
All right, so how long were you there?
4 months.
Then where?
Then we came home on delay en route, and I was home for a month. And, you know, I have some pictures in here from Camp Roberts that they didn't have colored film then, so these are all black and white. And then I was home for a month, and then I had the orders to go back to Fort Ord. It's that was in California near Carmel by the sea. And when I got there, they took all my ODs away from me. The train from Michigan to Fort Ord took 17 days, and I was in a cattle car. So I used to sleep on the floor, and I had this big army coat to keep warm, because it was in April. It was still, you know, pretty chilly. And when I got to Fort Ord, they took all my ODs away and gave me cotton stuff, so I knew I was going to the South Pacific. And I was there you could get a pass for 4 hours to go into Carmel, and they had army buses to take you in there. It was like 3 miles. But you had to come back because you never knew when they were going to call you to leave. So I think it was the 4th day when they said,
Is it one of these things where they let you out, but you gotta be able to be back within 24 hours?
4 hours.
4.
4 hours the pass was. And if you were gone more than 4 hours, when you came back, you had to turn the pass in to the whoever was at the desk there. And if you expired that time, then you were considered a deserter. So I would just go in for maybe an hour, hour and a half, and walk around, and then I'd come back on it. And the buses were going back and forth.
Okay, so you ship out for the South
Didn't-
Pacific.
You know, I didn't know where we were going. So we were on a troop train, and we were on a boat. And we came down into San Francisco Bay, and we got on this troop train, and it was about 9 o'clock at night when we were leaving. And I was down on about the 5th. There was over 5,000 troops on that train, on that boat. And we stayed all the way down the coast of America and South America, because they figured there weren't any Jap subs in that area. So we stayed pretty close to the coastline. We couldn't see the land, but they said they were pretty safe. And then when we got opposite New Guinea, way down in the South Pacific, then they went across. And that ride, I think that ride took around 14, 15 days also.
Did you get seasick?
Pardon me?
Did you get seasick?
No. You could go up on deck even at nighttime. It was warm, but and I didn't smoke, but you weren't allowed to smoke as soon as it got dark, because they were scared of maybe you could see, cigarettes burning.
And they have special setups on board ship that if an outside door is open, all the lights go out.
I don't remember.
And as soon
that.
as they shut the door, they go back on again, so that you
Maybe,
can't be seen.
yeah. I know we got fed twice a day, and you had to line up. And then they gave us that soap, because the water was salt water in the showers. So, and the guy in front of me, he was about like this. We just had those cots that was a canvas that you slept on. And the guy on top of me was about like this. It was a converted ship of some kind.
So where'd you end up?
In New Guinea, which I didn't know, and then of course there's no docks there, and they dropped anchor in the harbor, and then they had these little LSTs to bring in, and I can remember, right, and of course they were all quartered along because it was all jungle there, but and I was assigned to the 6th Red Star Division, and they had killed an anaconda snake. It was like 30 feet long, and they'd spread out along the top and hooked on to 2 trees, and they had made a sign, "Welcome to the 6th Division." That was my, and their combat in Oro Bay, that's where I was first, was pretty well over. We were more worried about venomous snakes than we were of the Japanese. But we had one big occasion. Halfway up the New Guinea coast, there was a place called Maffin Bay where we knew there was a big, still big reserve of Japanese soldiers, and we invaded.
So the
them.
Japanese were actually occupying parts of New Guinea.
Yeah, because their aim was to take over Australia.
Mhm.
So, and I have a lot of pictures of the natives here that when we came there, and of course their language was that native language, but we invited them to come and they worked for us, you know, cutting down trees, washing clothes, and we fed them, and so they knew that we would take good care of them, so we became good friends with the natives, where the Japs were just the opposite.
So what else happened while you were occupying?
Well, not too much.
Was there an effort to try to run the Japanese off?
Well, in Oro Bay there wasn't much left, but we knew in Maffin Bay, so we invaded there. And then when we finished then we started we started, and I was in the headquarters battery, so I knew we were going to invade the Philippines in Luzon. So we started training then, and then we moved up to the furthest part of New Guinea on a little place they call Sansapor. And that's where we left to invade the Philippines.
Now, was this before or after MacArthur left?
Oh, MacArthur had left already.
Okay.
Yeah, this was in late 1944.
Okay.
He was in Australia then.
Did you meet him?
I didn't meet him, but when the first bomb was dropped in Japan, and then a couple of days later they dropped the one on Nagasaki, and that's where we were supposed to invade. And we had a lot of photographs, and we figured we'd have maybe 70% casualties, because it was something similar to when they invaded Normandy, except instead of high ground, it was a mountainous area in Nagasaki. So, and that was first part of August, because I think the Japs surrendered finally on August 5th, and we were in Manila then, and MacArthur came there first, and they had a big ceremony, and he had come there, and I saw him, but I wasn't introduced to him. And then after, when they were making the final arrangements to sail the Missouri up to Tokyo Bay, and that's where they signed the final peace treaty. And then from there I went to Korea on occupation duty.
Back in New Guinea, what was your feeling of what you were doing on these invasions? Was that kind of scary?
Well, yeah, it was new to me, and but being in headquarters battery, I advanced. Some of those guys in headquarters battery had been in. The division was formed in 1941 in Hawaii. This the Red Star Division. So some of those fellows had a lot of points. So some went home even before we left New Guinea. So from a private, I think I was a tech sergeant, and then just before we left for Luzon, Paul Schmidt, that was his name, he was the master sergeant, and I was promoted to master sergeant just before we left New Guinea.
That's quite a
Yeah,
move.
that was real good. And
Now-
then, I think I told you in my baseball playing, when I got enough points in Korea to come home, you had to have 85 points. It was tied in with your age and your military.
Time.
And we had a really a good hardball team there. And by that time, there's a fellow by the name of Colonel Schwartz that had replaced General Hurtis, and he said the battery commander was going to go home. He said, "I'll give you a field promotion to captain." But I said, I got a wife waiting for me at home. I'm not, otherwise, if I wasn't married, and if I didn't have a steady girlfriend, I probably would have stayed in the military.
Now, I'm confused. You're telling me you're on these invasion teams, and then you're telling me in the next breath that you're playing baseball.
No, this was after the war ended, on Korea. On Korea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the 20th Air Force was there. There was a lot of teams, and we really had a good baseball team, hardball.
And the reason that you went on to Korea was simply you didn't have enough points.
I didn't have enough points, and we went there for occupation duty. We were in Seoul for a month, and then we moved down about 70 miles to a little city called Cheonju, and they gave us one of the schools there. That's where we were headquartered, and our division was there. We had the 53rd, 51st, and the 53rd. Those were 105 howitzers, and the 80th was the 155. So there was like 16,000 of us there
So this is South Korea.
in South Korea.
What was going on in North Korea?
Nothing then. Probably some things were going on, but we weren't. And well, Gary being Catholic, our division chaplain was Father O'Leary, and he was a pastor at St. Mary's in Redford.
Oh.
So, and even after the war, he used to come to our house. I lived on Grosse Ile. Come to our house for dinner. So, more than once he would say, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I says, "Well, the troops, we would have little going on in the morning for 4 hours. Then at noontime, you could do anything you wanted. This is in Korea." So he would have the cook make some sandwiches, and we'd get a Jeep, and we'd drive up to the border in North Korea and South Korea, and at the border there, the Korean guy said, "You want to come in and drive around?" But we never went in. But there was no problems that we knew of. But it must have been festering because 4 years later, the Korean War broke out.
How long were you in New Guinea?
From we left New Guinea in 1944 and 1943 in December, and just before Christmas, because we invaded Luzon in 1944 in January 9th, and I told you my father had died on January 10th, and it was almost 3 months before I got my first mail that I knew that he had died. So
Who was taking care of him after you lost your deferment?
my sister was home.
Let me stop here for a minute. There's kind of an interesting story. Your mom. She died first.
She died first.
How did she die?
She died, she had pneumonia, and they didn't have penicillin then. And I was home, and my father was home, but he was out someplace. And I was home with her, and when the doctor came, he said, "Run down to the corner drugstore," I think I told you, to get a tent. And I ran down to the corner, and the druggist knew me. He gave me that tent, and we were just a half a block from where we lived, from Hamilton. And when I got back, she had died out then.
Why did she really die?
I think she died from, I think I told you, from a broken heart, that she never wanted to leave Sylvania. 'Cause,
So she had trouble even in the immigration process.
well, she went to, and of course, my father and my brothers and sisters, went to school here and became very proficient in English. And then when we moved to Michigan, to Highland Park, she went to night school, and it was so frustrating. But at home, we were never allowed to speak Slovenian. You had to try to speak English because she wanted to try to learn the language. And then, of course, when they were working, they were all gone. And so that's the way it turned out.
She
But I always
just never
think,
was able to handle the conversion.
I think so. And she missed her
Sure.
her pals back in Slovenia.
During your stay in New Guinea, what was it like to be in battle? I mean,
Well, I say we didn't have much battle there, except Maffin Bay. But in Oro Bay, we were mostly training, and at nighttime, every once in a while, one of the Japs' bomber would come over, but they were our anti-aircraft guns couldn't reach them because they were flying maybe like at 4,000 feet, and every once in a while they would drop a bomb. And we always had foxholes, so when we saw them come over, and we had these searchlights, they were so powerful, and you could pick them out, but they were like at 40,000 feet, and the anti-aircraft artillery that we had couldn't reach that far.
now those were just agitation, trying to keep you away.
More or less.
I need to go back. We skipped over something I thought was kind of interesting. This is during your time with Chrysler, I think. And you actually had a chance to go into the minor league. Drafted?
Yeah, that was, I went one summer to Beaumont,
I
Texas.
mean, you were good enough.
That was 1938.
They wanted to draft you into the minor leagues to, was that,
Yeah, that was a Tiger Farm.
was that Wishegan that you went?
Wishegan was the Tiger Scout in the Detroit area.
Why didn't you take that opportunity?
I did go that one summer.
But after that,
But I think I told you, back, our outfielders today, except Torrey Hunter, but some of our outfielders, like Dirks, he had a good day yesterday, but he's batting 190, I guess. He's making like $6 or $7 million a year. Back in that year, Pete Fox played right field. He was batting 340, and JoJo White was a center fielder. He was batting like 350. And the Walker brothers, Gerald and Larry, they were the left fielders. They were, and I batted, I think, at like 330 in the Texas League. And then, of course, back then they had the American Association and the International League in California. That's where Joe DiMaggio came from. And those, there was a lot of minor league baseball then, which there isn't now. We have some minor league, but most of these guys coming out.
comparatively, yeah.
So we talked it over with my parents and my brothers and sisters, and they were all getting situated in Chrysler, and they said maybe that's. And when I got out of high school, I had scholarships because I was, being from an ethnic family, getting good marks wasn't a condition. You got them or else.
Mhm.
So I had good marks, and I was a good athlete, and I had a scholarship full scholarship for baseball and basketball at Western, Central, Michigan State, and UD. But they said you'd have to have maybe $10 every 3 weeks or so for incidental spending money. And we couldn't come up with it. Coming out of depression, we were just living. But my mother was a good provider, we always ate good, I was always dressed nice. So I decided I'll come back and stay with Chrysler, and it turned out to be a good.
Yeah, now, you're back from the war. And a couple things happened at Chrysler that I want to have you talk about. They sent you to school.
Well, they didn't send me to school, but they had the Chrysler Institute. And you didn't have to pay for anything. They provided the books and everything. So
This was similar to the GM Institute.
probably the same way as the GM. And I tried to get in the GM Institute when I got out of high school, but you had to be a GM employee or parents or somebody. So then when the war was over, and the Chrysler Institute was out on Jefferson Avenue where their plant was. So, and I didn't have a car then. I used to take a streetcar downtown to Detroit, and then a bus out to Jefferson Avenue to the school, 3 nights a week, Monday,
You know, they must
Wednesday.
have kept that a big secret, because when you told me that, I had never heard of Chrysler Institute. I heard of GM, but I never
Yeah.
heard of Chrysler.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That was the other thing. How about the girls? I didn't have time for girls, because on the weekends I had to study, Saturday and Sunday.
I tried at least half a dozen times to get him to talk about girls, and I was unsuccessful in all of them. You always had a reason, and the reason was logical, so I couldn't argue with it. I thought, what in the world's going on with this guy? I can't get him to chase any women.
That was the reason.
Okay, well, as it turned out, that was certainly to your benefit.
That's
And,
right.
and it's personal opinion, but in the end result, I think
Yeah.
you did far better than maybe you would have done, throwing your lot with professional
Oh,
baseball, which
absolutely.
there was no guarantees. You didn't come up with a
Yeah.
bad shoulder, a bad knee, or whatever.
I still, after 33 years, I still get that pension check from Chrysler every month.
Now, soon afterwards, you got into the, what do they call, the bonus group?
Yeah, that was in 1957 when I went to Trenton Engine, and I was a production control manager there.
By the way, when you got your exit from the service, Chrysler took you back.
Well, back then, you could stay home for, they call it, I think they call it 30/60 or something like that.
5220.
5220. Every month you'd get a check, and then after a couple of months, and I told you Van Warmer, he was with Elner's father in
Right.
World War I.
Uh,
And he called, he said, when are you coming back to work? So I decided I better go back
and
after,
if you went back, 5220 went away.
well, it went away, yeah.
So your choice was, let's stick
Yeah,
with the
but,
52.
well, that was.
Listen to me.
yeah. He
Take
said, when are
the
you coming back to work? I said, I'm
5220
really living a good life.
and go chase women.
Yeah, well, I was married then.
Well, that's all right. You can still chase women.
Oh, no, we never did that.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Good choice. Now, what do you mean by the bonus group?
Well, and I don't know how the system is now, but back then, Chrysler had they called them the A plants. That was the assembly plants, the big manufacturing plants, like the engine plant and the stamping plants. And the highest grade on my grade in the plant was grade 12. And that's when you started on the bonus group. So when they had good years, when they paid a bonus, you got a bonus.
So what does that mean? You're an executive?
Well, I wasn't, it was upper management. At that time, Chrysler only had, I think, 4 executives, and they were heads one was the executive vice president, who was the head of all the car plants. And another one, the executive vice president, who was head of the assembly plants. And then there was an executive vice president that was head of all the powertrain. And then there was an executive vice president that was head of personnel and finance and so forth. And then we had the president and the CEO. And I think
Who was the president?
at that time was Lynn Townsend.
Yeah,
Lynn Townsend. And then after he retired, then was when Ricardo came.
Yeah.
He was his friend from the accounting company where they all came from,
Touche Ross and Company.
Touche Russian.
That's where I started.
Oh, okay.
So I was aware of both Townsend and Ricardo.
Yeah.
And there was a third guy after that.
Well, when they hired Cafaro, he was an industrial engineer, but he was an Italian too.
No, there was another guy.
Oh.
Before Lee. And you mentioned his name.
Yeah, Eaton. Bob Eaton.
Bob, no, that was after.
That was after Ricardo, after Iacocca.
Yeah. There was another guy. I can't remember his name. But when I started in '66, boy, everybody was, wow, good. Some of our top executives moved on to big shots in the...
Yeah, they brought in that fellow from West Virginia. He was head of the coal mines to help Townsend when we were getting
Yeah.
into, and I forget his name, yeah. And then he left after a while.
Yeah,
And then Ricardo came in.
yeah. And Ricardo's son is a priest.
John Ricardo, I know him very well. He's good. He was a pastor at St. Anastasia
Yeah,
Right.
after my nephew left there.
yeah.
And he's out at Plymouth now. I go see him every once in a while.
Okay, so you get a bonus plan, which pretty good.
They made
I mean,
money.
you're moving up.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you're batting 340.
Over the years until I retired, and some years when I didn't make any money, you didn't get anything. But over the years, I got almost $100,000 in bonuses from 1957 till 1980 when I retired.
Was your wife proud of you?
Huh?
Was your wife
Oh,
proud
I
of you?
think she was. Yeah.
Too bad your mom didn't stick around long enough
Yeah,
to see all
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And your dad, for that matter.
And when I was playing ball, she was the only one who wouldn't come to watch me play, because when I'd bring my glove home and a hard ball, we'd play catch in the backyard with my brothers, and she saw that ball, she'd never come to watch me play. 'Cause we didn't have helmets then, but I used to get hit, but I never got hit in the head. But my father and my sisters and my brothers, when we played one Sunday at Northwestern Field and the other Sunday at Belle Isle. And we'd have like 4,000 or 5,000 people there for the Class A games. It was good baseball.
It's funny, I never heard that one. The one I remember is Mack Field, I think. Is it
Mack Field, yeah, Mack Avenue.
Yeah.
That came later.
That, Willie Horton used to play there.
Yeah. Well, Willie Horton, Louis D'Annunzio, he was our manager, and after he became a Tiger Scout, after the war, he discovered Willie Horton.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, we're leading up to a big crescendo here. I don't remember the timing of it, but you get this letter recognizing you and your family from some big shot.
That was I should have brought that.
You didn't bring that?
No.
You told me you were going to bring that.
If you want me, I can go home and get it. It'll only take me 10 minutes if you want.
Well, tell us about that. I thought that was neat.
Yeah. My son Pete, when he graduated from college, he worked for an accounting company, and then he went with Chrysler. Well, that would be 37 years ago, and he started out in the stamping division in the accounting there, and then later on he advanced. And then when Iacocca came to Chrysler in 1979, I think it was, when they were struggling to get money. Well, Pete and a guy by the name of Joe Arpin and a couple of guys from Lazaire, that investment company in New York, they went to Europe to try to borrow money, and he was in that group. And then when he came back, Kaucheck met him once in Geneva, and he bought Rolex watches for all four guys, the two guys from Lazaire's and the two guys from Chrysler, because they doing a good job, and they made presentations, and they were able to borrow money. And that was before Blanchard, who was our senator, really went to bat for Chrysler, and when they got the loan. Well, then over the years, Pete went to Highland Park, and then when Kaucheck when he bought Gulfstream, I think that was in 1984 when he bought Gulfstream. They opened up a office in Washington, just 4 blocks from the Capitol, and Pete was the head finance guy then for Gulfstream. And then he came back to Chrysler. They brought him back, and he was chief financial officer for the sales and marketing group. And then he used to go to New York when they had the board meetings, and he would go to New York a couple of days before, and Chrysler had a couple company planes at the Pontiac Airport. That's where they are housed, and that's where he'd go to fly to New York. And then he would go over what the board meeting was going on with the non-Chrysler people that were on the board. And one time, I guess shortly after when Kaucheck went with him, he didn't hardly go with him when he went earlier to advise the people what was going on. And a fellow by the name of Greenwood was he was the head of Ford in South America when Kaucheck brought him to Chrysler. That's the guy who should have made CEO instead of Eaton. But anyway, Kaucheck was asking about his family, so Pete told him, he says, well, my grandfather worked for Ford, and my uncles and aunts all worked for Chrysler, and my dad. And they had taken a picture of me when I retired from on-road engine. So, and I had it framed. So he took that with him and showed Kaucheck, and that's when I showed you. Kaucheck wrote a message down the bottom of that picture.
He had a big sheet, and Kaucheck long-handed the whole damn thing.
I love it.
No, he didn't just sign the sucker. It was
And
all long-handed.
he thanked me and the
Congratulations
family
and
for all they
thanking you.
contributed to Chrysler, and he said, your son is one of our rising executives. So,
And that's something.
yeah,
That's
that
great.
was,
I was really impressed with him to take the time to do that.
yeah,
I mean, just to sign it would have
yeah,
been nice,
to
but
sign his name.
the long
And-
end, the
and
whole
write,
thing,
yeah.
Pretty
don't
cool.
get rid of that. That's, I mean, anytime a boss like that can
No,
take the time
Take the
to say
time to
all
do
those
it.
nice things, and then do it longhand.
do it longhand,
I mean, that took a little bit of effort. And then, you don't even bring the darn thing.
Well, I didn't want you to think, geez, that guy is showing all this stuff off.
That's what you're here for, is to
Well,
show off. This is your turn.
Okay. You know, I told you, when McCain was running for president, went to one of his town hall meetings, Gary, and he signed my book. And then when Romney came here, I went there, and Romney signed it, and he wrote a little message on there.
What
Cool.
did McCain say?
I don't know.
No, but he,
You can see.
yeah, thanks for serving. He had heard about you while he was there.
At that town hall
Yeah.
meeting, our
And he made an
supervisor.
effort to go find you because he wanted to tell you.
Well, we were
that.
sitting there, and our supervisor said, we got a guy here from World War II that saw a lot of combat, and So I had to
Bring
stand
him on,
up.
he said, so he went
Yeah.
over there to make sure. I thought that was, he had some really
Good
nice,
experiences. Yeah.
good experiences. You said earlier when we started talking, you know, maybe I should have gone, maybe I should have done. It sounds like you did pretty well.
Yeah.
In the decisions you made.
We're the right ones.
Now, you lost your wife a while back.
It'll be 29th of May, it'll be 13 years.
She was sick.
Just about a year.
Yeah.
She started to get dementia.
Yeah.
Never sick a day in her life. The 56 years, then the 57 years, and then she was doing pretty good. I took care of her at home, and there was a pill that they use quite a bit now. It's called Aricept.
Aricept,
And it
yep.
was brand new then, and I'd give her one pill a day, and she had good days and bad days. And the Saturday morning, she woke up, she started screaming, and I was in the kitchen. I was up already, couldn't breathe, and I called 911. They took her to Beaumont, and they did a catheter on her. She had two main arteries that were 100% blocked, and one about 70. But they said they could operate that and no problem. But there's a valve. It's called the. Can't think of the name of that valve now, that cleanses the blood when it leaves your heart and goes to your brain, and that was damaged. And they only gave a 50% guarantee that she would survive an operation on that. And if they would operate, I had to sign a waiver that if she died, I couldn't sue them. So my son was with me at Beaumont Hospital, and he said, "What's the other alternative?" Says, as far as we can determine of all the tests and everything, with the operation or on the medicine that we give you, maybe 2 to 3 years at the most. And it was almost 2 years to the date.
So,
And I gave her this medicine, and we would walk sometimes 2 blocks, 3. We used to walk a lot, and she liked to play golf. We'd go maybe play 1 or 2 holes. She'd say, "I'm tired, let's go home." So
who's this B-24 crew?
that's Eleanor's brother, Barney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they were shot down on a mission coming back from Germany over Free France, and for about 30 days they would move him. Luckily, he was recovered by good people in France,
Uh-huh.
and they would hide him in the daytime because they were looking for these people that were on that plane, the Germans. So they would move him at nighttime, and finally they got to the American lines.
Is this picture in Camp Roberts in '44? Was that your wife?
Yeah, that's
Oh, I'll
Eleanor.
be darned. That's Eleanor.
Yeah.
Well, I'll
Is
be
it-
Yeah,
darned.
she came out there at Christmas, and we got an apartment where a lot of other wives in Paso Robles. That was 11 miles from Camp Roberts.
She's a pretty lady. There's another one.
And then she came home with me on the train when I finished my training.
So she seemed to adapt well to your change in lifestyle for a while.
I think pretty close. There's those pamphlets we dropped on Luzon when we were asking the Japs to surrender.
Oh, here,
Yeah,
no.
there it is. Yeah,
Is
that's
it?
it. Yeah, that's it right there. Yeah, is this part in English?
Yes.
Yeah, and the other. Let me see a minute. No, this is 100. That was 112 days in combat. This is the one. where we ask them, I surrender, and then on the back it's all in Japanese.
Huh,
That's the pamphlets that we drop from
wow,
planes
it was
on
even
Luzon.
Japanese up
Yeah,
here.
on front.
Did it do any good?
No, because the head commander in Japan was Yamamoto, and his brother was the one that led the Air Force when they raided Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, Yamamoto.
That was his brother, and he said, we're not going to surrender, and then he committed suicide, which the Japanese officers did, you know.
Well,
And then-
he told all the Japanese that we
Right.
would do the same thing to them that they were doing to us.
Fight to the death, you know.
That's where those women and children jumped off that cliff when
Right.
they, yeah. And this was, what was this letter? Oh, it's it's that part of the English of that propaganda.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what was this letter to your wife on your first wedding anniversary?
Was that a poem?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm no poet, but my buddy.
Oh, that's neat. So you wrote home and you said nice things.
Yeah, we could.
That makes you a good man.
We had those, whatever they called them back then. And we write a little letter, and they would send it.
Yeah. My brother was in Vietnam,
Yeah, you told me.
and he would write with his pen a stamp, made it look like a stamp, and in the middle he'd say free.
Free, huh?
And I used to get those all the time, and I think that's kind of clever, and that made it through.
Yeah.
Is this you here?
Yeah, that's me in New Guinea. I'm
Wow.
down to 165 pounds. I lost 30 pounds when I first got there, then it stayed there, because New Guinea was 100 degrees day and night, and the humidity was like about 120.
Wow. What'd you take these with? Your little brownie Hawkeye?
Well, when I told you, when we were on New Guinea, there was a group called Special Services. They used to come around, and I was able to buy this little camera, and they would, all you could buy would be 2 rolls of film, because they had just so many. And then I would send the rolls of film home to Eleanor. Then she when I got home, she had that book all made for me. Those pages.
Oh, she put this book together.
Yeah, those, you see they're starting to deteriorate.
Yeah.
Yeah, this goes back to 1944, 1945.
Wow. Yeah. Boy. You did a good job putting this
Yep.
together.
You sure did.
So how long were you away from your wife?
Almost, well,
Couple years?
yeah, well, I left in April of 1943, and I came home, it was in March of 1945. About 2.5 years, somewhere around there.
That must have been really tough.
Yeah. Well, at nighttime, when Of course, when we were in battle in Luzon, but on New Guinea, you have to think about it a little bit. And of course, he was working, so
Did you write her every day?
every day, wrote a little
Every
something.
day?
Every day.
You're
Couple
not lying
lines,
to me,
yeah.
are you?
I'm feeling good, everything's okay here, don't worry, pray for me.
She write you?
And she wrote me up. When we got our first mail on, and my brothers and sisters, at least once a week, I had a stack of letters like this.
Yeah, it goes back.
Yeah, that was almost
They'll
3
pile
months,
up,
yeah.
Trying to find you.
Yeah, well, it
Yeah.
eventually caught up to us.
Now, you didn't tell me this, but you also got a personal letter from Harry Truman.
Well, yeah, everybody did.
No, you didn't have to say that.
It's in the end there.
I know where it is.
You know where it is. Yeah.
So this was from Harry Truman, and it was addressed to Dear John.
You're there.
Well, John Kaucheck. Right from the White House. Well, that's impressive.
I always figured he saved my life. You know, he dropped the bombs, and
Yeah,
and like I said, we expected almost 80% casualties in Nagasaki, where we were supposed to invade.
yeah, the casualty percentage was
Very
really
high.
high. Oh, you didn't tell me this one either. And this was longhand, and it was addressed to Dear John. Who was it?
I don't know who was that from Lingaman?
No, Ernie Harwell.
Oh, that was after, yeah.
Dear John, enjoyed your letter. Taters was this was
Remember-
Frank Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I go
He was
to
quite
every
a
morning,
picture of
Jerry.
the-
I go down to McDonald's. Another half a dozen guys, so we discuss all the programs. So a couple of years ago, we were trying to think of who that Yankee killer was, the
Yeah.
pitcher. We couldn't think of his name, so I
Frank-
wrote to Ernie Harwell,
Frank Larry.
and
Yeah.
he wrote me back.
Frank Larry,
And it
yeah.
was Frank Larry.
Taters.
And yeah, they called him Taters.
He come off a farm down south. Well, we escaped. I took part of your Part of your book,
Yeah,
but-
one of these days I'm gonna sit down and, because my granddaughter Abby wants this, so Saturday afternoon, we went to Kalamazoo. I told her she's a cancer nurse, and she ran in the Kalamazoo Marathon, and she ran 25.2 miles in 3 hours and 29 minutes.
It's impressive.
And to qualify for the Boston Marathon, you have to run in a registered marathon, which the Kalamazoo one is, and it was for charity. And you have to run the 25.2 miles in 3 hours and 45 minutes or less. So she qualified for the Boston Marathon, and she's going there next year.
Good for her.
She has to be at the hospital in Kalamazoo every morning at 7 o'clock, and she's been getting up like 4:30, and she runs for 2 or 3 hours to train. And when she got through yesterday, I said, Abby, you look like you just got out of bed. She wasn't even puffing, but she's in good shape. And her time was, in her age, she's 29,
29.
her time was the fourth best in 26 to 32 age group.
It's great.
You had two sons, Peter and Mickey.
Pete
How,
and
how
Mickey.
did they turn out?
Well, Pete was one for Chrysler, and he's retired now. And Mickey he's got another year to work. He's a sales agent for Hewlett Packard for all of Michigan, Lower Michigan, Upper Indiana, Up Ohio, and part of Illinois.
How
I
many
need-
grandchildren do you have?
4.
Any great
Well,
grandchildren?
no great grand. Doesn't look like any there. I don't know.
Doesn't look like
My
it.
days are getting numbered. I tell that to my cousin Branka, that's the nurse in Slovenia, and in fact, she's coming here in late summer for give conferences on palliative nursing, and so I want to take her on a cruise when she comes here. So I said, Branka, my days are getting numbered. And she said, Uncle, don't talk like that. So I said, well, I'm realistic, but I told him I really enjoy good health.
Yeah, you look
I
good.
take no medication. My blood pressure's good, my cholesterol's good, but I do something every day. In the wintertime I walk a couple miles, and now I cut grass for myself, and I told my friend Shirley.
And I've enlisted him to come and cut my grass.
And, right. This when we went to Iran in 1974, we were in Ferrars. They were some of our best friends that went with us. And when we came back, then we went over to visit them. Well, Pace, his name was Ray Ferrar, but they called him Pace. They're from New England.
Mm-hmm.
And he died in 1979. He was retired and never sick. He died of a heart attack. So we were visiting Shirley that summer, and she was complaining about the guy cutting her grass doing a lousy job, and Eleanor said, well, John likes to cut grass, he'll come and cut it, and I've been doing it ever since. I go every week, cut her grass, she makes dinner, and I think I told you about 4 years ago when the gas first got to about $4 a gallon, and they live in just off of Adams Road, Bloomfield Hills.
Yep.
There's about a half acre of grass to cut. But Pace has a nice Sears, what's their brand name?
Craftsman.
Craftsman. He has a nice tractor, so I sit on that it's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
I sit on that for almost 2 hours. And then I have a power mower to cut on the patio, and then I do the weed whacking. So she wanted to pay me, so I said, well, I'm not coming anymore then. So that October, she invited me over for dinner, and I went over, and she had a Costco's card. So she said, my son says, you got to do for him all the money that he saved you over the years. So I accept the Costco card. So, and they debit my Merrill Lynch account, and then she gives me a check. So I said, okay, I'll accept that. So I
Well,
was
that's
there.
fun, go through Costco.
Yeah. And I was there last Friday, cut
Yeah,
their grass.
that's a good hour and a half of,
And she always makes the dinner. She's a baseball fan, and if the Tigers are playing, we watch a couple innings, then I come home.
Great.
And she always makes enough I bring home for a meal the next day.
right.
And I was telling him, she's had colon cancer twice. She's a diabetic. She's
Oh,
got
my
heart
goodness.
problems.
Wow.
And to hear her talk, you think she's the healthiest person in the world. Never complains. And she lives by herself, so good egg.
Now, how is she related to you?
No relation.
No
We
relation.
met him when we went to Iran.
Oh, that was the young lady you were telling me about, that
Yeah.
you've been
Well-
kind of helping out because she's been not feeling well, and
Yeah.
we didn't
Yeah.
get into that discussion, but you did
Well,
mention
when
that,
Eleanor
too, and I
said-
remember that.
She was complaining about paying this guy, and he wasn't doing a good job.
Right,
And
right.
Eleanor said, John likes to cut grass, he'll come and cut the grass. That was 1979. I'm still doing it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And enjoyed your stories, John.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I have one question. Where, you were in the Philippines when they dropped the bomb in Japan?
What was the first place?
They dropped it in
First one was
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima. And then the following week, they dropped it in Nagasaki because they wouldn't.
Right.
They wouldn't surrender.
And where were you at that point? You were
I was in the Philippines.
in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So,
And we had neutralized the Philippines pretty well. Most of the Japs were dead, and the few that were still alive that had surrendered, and there was a week, our division came in on Luzon, which is the eastern, northern part of Luzon in Manila Bay. And the 25th came in on the south part, so we were going like this. We were going from the northeast down, and we went through Manila, and the 25th was coming up this way. And then when we dropped these pamphlets, we knew and we didn't want to kill anymore, and we asked them to surrender, but they wouldn't surrender.
Were you aware of the bombs?
Pardon me?
Were you
No.
aware they were gonna bomb?
No.
You were thinking that you were going to be part of an invasion,
Part of the invasion,
and
yeah.
probably feeling pretty nervous about it.
And we were, and I was in headquarters battery then, of course, I knew where we were gonna go. And we were gonna start training to invade, and then we were gonna get, in our division, we were gonna get some mountainous equipment where we could try to land there and get our artillery pieces in.
So it was a pretty big surprise when they dropped the bombs, and then a couple of days later,
Well, we
The
knew,
war was over.
yeah, we knew that was gonna be the end.
Yeah.
And then, remember Harry Truman?
Yeah.
He was the one that, he said they wouldn't surrender, so, and we had the
right?
Nogola Gay, that was that first,
Enola Gay out of Tinian.
yeah, first flyer on the
What-
B-29s.
What was the reaction of everybody in your unit when you heard that this bomb had been
Well,
dropped?
We knew there were, thousands of people got killed, and we didn't like that. Especially me coming from a Catholic family and where we grew up. I tell Father Ron today, I said, someday I want to have a confession with you. I still remorseful of the people that I killed. That
Well, you were doing what you could to avoid it,
when
and what you were doing,
the first week of basic training in Camp Roberts, and I never shot a gun in my life till I got in the service, and I've never shot one since. But I remember the first week, there was an Army colonel that had been in Vietnam. Not in Vietnam, he was in, I think he was in the Korean War, 1950. And he was showing us how to use a saber, and he said, you either kill or be killed. I remember those words. He said, when you get in combat, you either kill or be killed.
it's only two ways to look at
Yeah.
it.
And what we got going on now. You didn't want to see any of that, those are my discharge papers, and you saw those.
So was there a big celebration when the word came that the war was over?
Well, we were glad to be over because
Yeah.
we were still alive, and I knew I was coming home to family and to a wife and to,
But you didn't come home right away. They sent you to Korea?
no, I had to go to Korea.
Yeah, so you didn't come home right away?
No, not,
Yeah,
that was about 5 or 6 months after.
okay. So why did they send you to Korea as part of the an
I
occupation?
don't know.
I guess I never even knew that Korea was
Yeah.
involved.
Well,
I
they
knew that
weren't, but
people-
when you had time left, they had to go someplace,
You never know points.
bring you
Well,
back
and
here.
I- and I-
Yeah, I know, but I was just
And I'm
surprised that
sure
they didn't send you
they
to
are watching, and
Japan.
I'm sure they had some inklings what's going on in North
Okay.
Korea. This guy's
Okay.
father was in,
Yeah.
and they were very
Yeah, we've
communistic.
interviewed several that ended up in Japan
Yeah,
Yeah,
after the
yeah.
official declaration and the war over, that spent time in Japan. They got a bunch of people, they gotta figure out where we're gonna send them.
Yeah, and it was still, now that's the thing with the budget
It's
cuts.
a good point, Ann. It could have been that they were suspicious of things
yeah,
coming up, and we
Yeah.
needed a presence in South
Yeah,
Korea,
yeah.
so that, you're
And
right.
it was this little village of Chanju where we stayed. There was a Japanese family had come there way back in the 1800s, and he started a rice plantation. And he had all these Korean people and they loved these people, and they died off, and the son then married a Japanese girl, and he continued. And when the Japs invaded that part of South Korea, they didn't kill the Korean people, they killed that Japanese man and his wife, because they found out that the people revered that family, they were so good to them, and his rice plantations.
You got some medals, John.
Yep.
The Victory Medal,
I should have brought that too, that my friend.
Asiatic Pacific Theater Ribbon. You got some bronze battle stars. What were they for?
For overseas combat.
Philippine Liberation, 3 overseas service bars, and good conduct?
Well, I told you, I didn't have time for girls when I was on.
Now, when you came back to the States, they dropped you off in California?
We were supposed to land in the port in Seattle, and they had tremendous storms. And I was on a naval ship, and being high-ranking military, I was master sergeant. I slept with the naval officers, and we had tremendous storms. And this boat, I was up near the front. When it rise and then come down, it sounded like artillery shells going off. And we were supposed to make that trip in about 9 days. And after the first 7 days, the storms were so bad they diverted us to Long Beach, California, and we landed there. And then from Long Beach, we got on a train to Camp Sheridan, and that's where I got discharged from in Chicago. And when I got to Chicago, the train landed in Chicago, and then they took us the buses to Camp Sheridan. And I called my wife, and then she came the next day in the morning, and her brother came with her, Barney, that was in the service, and that's the first time I saw her.
How was the food supplies when you were in New Guinea?
Being in headquarters battery,
Oh, okay.
where the general lived,
Yeah.
and the chef was from New York. He was a
Okay.
chef in a restaurant, so we ate pretty good there. And when we were still in Oro Bay, General Hurtis, he liked to fish. So, and somehow he maneuvered this power boat. I don't know where he got it from. And I said, in Oro Bay, there wasn't much going on. So, sometime during the day, he said, anybody want to go fishing tomorrow? So he'd take 2 or 3 guys, and he'd tell the cook to make some sandwiches, and we'd go out in the South Pacific there, and we'd catch these fish, and then the cook, and he would, maybe the next day for dinner, like in headquarters battery, we had there was 90 non-commissioned people, and we had the general, the doctor, he was a major, the S3 was the buttons on their collars, the rank, next to the major. Colonel O'Connor. They were all in headquarters battery. So we would catch tons of fish, and the cook would prepare them, and then we'd make a big fire the next day, and he would broil these fish on planks, on wood planks. It was delicious.
What kind of fish?
Barracuda. I remember barracuda were one. Those barracudas were like this, and they were good eating. And like I say, I wasn't a fisherman either, so I don't know too much, but it was good fishing.
My father-in-law was fought in New Guinea, and he was there probably a little bit earlier than you were because he was rotated back out to Fort Riley by 44.
Fort Riley, Kansas.
Yeah, so he must have been there in 43.
Probably
And-
42, because they had a lot of combat
Yeah,
there.
well,
Because
maybe,
the-
yeah, I'm
the-
not, I don't,
The
he's
Japs
gone
were
now.
there first,
Yeah.
because they wanted to invade Australia.
Yeah, he was, he's gone now, in fact, he
Yeah.
died before this program even started. But I remember him telling us that, they were short on rations, and they were so tired of the field rations anyway, and they were short, and he shot a crow. And they tried to, they plucked it, and they tried to stew this crow, and he
Yeah.
said, they just boiled it for hours and hours, and it was still tough as anything.
Yeah.
They couldn't even eat it, that he was, they thought maybe they were gonna get a little, good little
I
meal
think
out of
when,
it, and they just
When we were invading,
just tough and stringy.
when we were invading Mason Bay, I had my camera with me, and took us 3 days to get there on these LSTs, and we'd boil a big bucket, a big barrel that we had of water, and we'd throw our K-rations in there. That's what we ate for 3 days. I got a picture of that here someplace. If I can
I
find
mean,
it.
K-rations are bad enough, throw it in
Oh,
a
they weren't bad.
bucket of water and, geez,
They weren't bad.
gross. This is a
Yeah.
picture of John McCain and John
Oh, yeah.
back in 2008. Republicans were making a run
Yeah,
through
that
the
was in
state,
That was in the paper, yeah.
and John got to meet him again after the letter he got. That's kind of neat.
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions they want to?
If you're gonna be, I'd like to show you these others and maybe take pictures of those, of that, Iacocca thing. And then also, a friend of mine here about 3 years ago made me a beautiful thing. It's in the glass, did I bring that with me? I had my picture, and she had New Guinea and my ribbons, and it's really a nice,
Can I see the scrapbook?
sure.
We have another interview, John, coming up at 12,
Today,
and we'll
Here?
be here from 12 to about 1:30.
would you like if I brought those over? And
Sure.
I'll bring them over. I'm really proud of those two.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
Good, I'll bring them over.
yeah, the interview should be around 12 o'clock, and it should go for an hour and a half.
So I'll come over around 1 then.
Yeah,
You should be pretty well finished.
Yeah.
Okay.
will you be able to find your way back here?
I will now.
Good interview, John. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
John, I
Oh.
appreciate it very
Oh,
much.
anytime. It was 5 years ago when I was in Gulf Shores, Alabama during the winter. This friend of mine looked after my house, and she knew of my war record. And she looked at, to find some of my pictures and my medals, and then in her craft work, made that poster for me, which I thought was very neat.
I'm going to try to zoom on the medals there, Dave. The top.
What's the difference between honorary service and good conduct?
I don't know.
I've not
Those-
seen honorary
Those,
service before.
all those medals they sent me about 10 years after I was home.
I mean,
one
I've
day
seen
in the
good
mail.
conduct, and that's just, you never
Yeah.
got in trouble.
All those medals and the good conduct and the marksman, they all came in the mail. It was at least 10 years after I was home.
Well, the three on the top and this one here are reflections of battle zones you were in.
Yeah.
You were there and you got them. This one, I don't know what the honorable service means.
I don't know, this
And
was
the
good
2
conduct.
stars, are those,
That was, I think, combat areas.
okay,
I'm not too sure.
but that's neat. I'll
Yeah,
show you
isn't
what
that
the maps
beautiful?
in there, we need to do that here, where I can refer to the map and show people where you were so they can see it in the
Oh,
globe.
okay.
And, we just haven't been able to do that where
Yeah.
we were, but I think we can do it here.
Okay.
Well, isn't that nice?
I'll be out of your way in just a minute.
We're finished, so you don't have to worry about it.
And there's my highest moment when I was playing ball. That's 1937. You probably weren't born yet. We used to have 3 papers in the Detroit area.
Oh, thank you.
The News, the Free Press, and the Times.
Times. Yeah. I remember the Times.
And
I used to deliver all 3 of them.
Yeah, and my sister cut that out of the paper on Monday after the Sunday after the ball game, and she'd save that for me.
One guy looks like Johnny Growth.
Dave,
Well,
Tip-
that one, that's Johnny Sharp, and
Huh. Can you sit?
it's good. Good.
Yeah, I think somebody was looking
and you
out
saw
for
this.
you.
That's the Lee Iacocca thing.
Now, you need to see the bottom, because that's where his handwritten name was. Or his handwritten
Message
comments were.
or whatever.
Yep. Can you read it?
Yes.
Do so.
Dear John, I want to personally thank you for the important contribution that you and your family have made to Chrysler. You should also be very proud of your son, Pete. As one of our young executives, he's carrying on the fine Kaucheck name. Sincerely, Lee Iacocca.
How cool is that?
That,
I'm proud of that.
yes, I think you should be. I mean, you don't have to like Lee Iacocca, but he was the
Yeah.
boss
Right?
who took the time to write.
To do
I
that.
just
yeah.
think that's heavy.
Well, I told you, we have the most seniority in one family in Chrysler, 218 years.
Wow.
That's
And I have
my
never
own family.
seen
Then my son had
Lee's-
25 years.
Longhand writing before.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen his signature, but I've never, actually, that isn't really writing, that's almost printing. I didn't, that's neat.
Yep. Okay.
Brought it,
Well,
because I
thank you, folks,
disappointed
for,
you didn't bring it before.
For the wonderful work that you're doing. I know all us veterans
Don't
appreciate that
send
too.
thanks, send
So,
money.
you know, all the work that you're doing.
Are you done photographing?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, John, very much.